things that have been really interesting over the past couple of days is with the success of the Kirby Air Riders Direct, everyone's excited about Air Riders. Everyone's saying it's going to be better than Mario Kart World. Everyone's saying Sakurai cooked. And yet, there is an inexplicable lack of comparison between Kirby Air Riders and Sonic Racing Crossworlds. When Crossworlds was announced, everyone said that would destroy Mario Kart. Sonic was peak. Sonic was going to take over. The Dreamcast 2 was going to come back. Ulala was going to come to my house and suck my dick. There was all this like weird talk about how Mario was going to lose to Sonic, just like they've done since the 90s. It was just this giant narrative cope that Sonic Racing Crossworlds was going to outperform Mario Kart World. And the game is out now, and it is a complete nothing burger. It barely hit 1 million units sold. No one's talking about it. No one's playing it. The only people who care about it are people who weaponized it against Mario Kart World and just worship Sonic the Hedgehog because they had miserable, lonely childhoods. Kirby Air Riders is going to outperform Sonic Racing Crossworlds. Just like Mario Kart World outperformed Sonic Racing Crossworlds. But where exactly in the community are you seeing people acknowledge this very basic fact that not only could Sonic not beat Mario, he also could not beat Kirby? Kirby in the Forgotten Land was a huge success. Air Riders is going to outperform Sonic Racing Crossworlds. So why exactly are people still talking about Sonic, pretending Sonic is relevant, when Kirby Air Riders is going to handedly outperform it, when Kirby is a bigger IP than Sonic, it has a better history than Sonic, it's more relevant than Sonic. Masahiro Sakurai is one of the industry legends at this point, while Yuji Naka is in a prison for tax evasion. Okay? That is the reality of our situation at this point, is that Kirby is peak and has been for decades at this point, and yet we're still supposed to believe that Sonic the Hedgehog is relevant. In this era where he's about on the same level of credibility as Bubsy the Bobcat. Well, he still gets new games. Yeah, so does Bubsy. It's like, Sonic's doing better than Crash Bandicoot, but not by much. What exactly? Why exactly would is this blue rat still shoved down our throats? Why exactly can we not acknowledge that Kirby is bigger than Sonic the Hedgehog now? Why can't we acknowledge that Donkey Kong was bigger than Sonic the Hedgehog? Why are people still desperate to keep the Sonic versus Mario rivalry going when that was never really a thing to begin with? Donkey Kong Country by itself destroyed all of the Sonic games. Super Mario World destroyed all of the Sonic games. Mario 64 was bigger than Sonic Adventure. At what point in Sonic's history was it ever competitive with Nintendo outside of, grade schoolers, screaming about blast processing? That is the reality of Sonic's legacy, is that it's a bunch of children from the ghetto, harassing Nintendo fans for having more money than them and owning Super Nintendos. That's it. That's Sega's entire legacy. That's the only thing that people care about. Sonic had Sega had sports games. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about Sonic. But Sonic, he goes fast. He's a fast character. Yeah, he's so fast that he needs a car in a racing game. Just get out of here. I was watching Kirby Air Riders, and there's a bit where Rick the hamster gets off his vehicle and starts sprinting, and I'm just that is probably faster than Sonic the Hedgehog can move. Because if you know anything about Kirby, and you know how fast the Warp Star is, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, he uses the Warp Star to be the only person who got away from Galeem, if you remember the intro cinematic. Kirby was the only person who survived that. The only character that survived that onslaught. Sonic could not outrun that blast. You know, like he was too busy like trying to like reach for Pikachu and like become Sonichu. Like that was like Sonic's big plays that like, oh, I'm gonna transform into Sonichu and then I'll save the day, and it didn't happen. Like Rick the Hamster is faster than Sonic the Hedgehog. That's just the reality of it. You know, like you can see that very clearly demonstrated in this game. And if you don't believe me, like when in Sonic Racing Crossworlds does Sonic get out of his car and race on foot? It doesn't happen because Sonic is not as fast as people pretend he is. Sonic is a complete farce. You know, there are probably dozens of Nintendo characters that are faster than him, but we are seeing Rick the Hamster, a relatively obscure Kirby character, outdoing Sonic in his own game. Just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So, with all that being said, looking at what's happening here, happening with Kirby Air Riders, with Sonic Racing Crossworlds, like, can we all just agree that we're never going to talk about Sonic again? You know, I don't want to hear his name brought up in video game conversations ever, okay? Because this was not a competitor to Mario Kart, you know? It was not a competitor to Kirby Air Riders, you know? Real gamers are going to be playing Kirby Air Riders this holiday season. Nobody's going to be playing Sonic, you know? Unless you're like, you know, your parents are cheap fucks and they buy you like a heavily discounted Sonic Racing Crossworlds at GameStop. Like, here you go, son. Like, when you specifically ask for Mario Kart instead. Like, that is the only scenario that anyone would select Sonic Racing Crossworlds over Kirby. Like, that's just the reality of it. You are a broke bum. You know? You are scum. So, with all that being said, like, we do need to acknowledge this more. We do need to talk about this more. This does need to be, like, addressed more because it's not about Mario versus Sonic anymore. It's about all of the Nintendo properties that are just beating the shit out of Sonic right now. It's not just Kirby. It's Metroid. It's F-Zero. It's Fire Emblem. You know, like, there was that really funny, like, video, you know, on the streets of Japan where, like, that guy was going around asking people about Sonic the Hedgehog. Nobody there knows anything about Sonic other than the fact he's in Super Smash Bros. Like, that's just the reality of it. The only reason Sonic the Hedgehog has any credibility at all is that Western fans demanded he be in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Like, that's the only reason that anybody remembers Sonic. That's the only reason anybody talks about him, is that he was in a much better video game series from a much better console manufacturer. Sonic is a complete fraud.